B. Holmes, kick this off. What are your thoughts on Texas and OU joining the SEC?
I'm when I originally heard the news, at first, I'm not even gonna lie, I panicked a little bit. I was like, oh my goodness, the SEC is getting stronger. What is the Big Ten gonna do? Everyone know. If you don't know, if you're a first time listener, I'm a big Big Ten guy. And so, I started doing all this research about what the Big Ten should do to kind of counteract what the SEC was going to do, right? And I have a whole argument on that, and I think we can get into that in a later episode on what I feel like the Big Ten should have done in the midst of that, which I still think they can do. But my feelings on that is it's this, Trey, is it's my biggest beef with Texas. I'll at least give OU this. OU's going to be competitive every year. They're going to have a shot to make the playoff every year. They're going to now their defense is always going to be their Achilles heel, right? But we know OU, when they're rolling, they can put points up with anybody. No question about it.
They've been owning the Big 12 for
years.
5,
I feel
6
like
years
2
now
decades now. It feels like almost. I look at Texas, man, and I think Texas has a little bit of what I call sometimes the Michigan syndrome. They're so hyped up on who they used to be that there's no really who they are now. And so, I mean, we remember, man, they hired Tom Herman. He was supposed to be that dude.
The savior.
It didn't work. Yeah, he was just saying it didn't work out. You bring in Sark, who I'm not really sold on Sark anyways, but I guess we'll see. And I think they just got a reality check last night playing your boys down there in Fayetteville and seeing, man, the SEC is no joke. Like, the SEC is prepared to bring a whooping to them every week. And all I'm saying is I don't think it's a good move. I think Texas should stay in the Big 12 because what you just showed last night, if you're trying to recruit kids to come and play for you now that you're going to the SEC, is I hope you guys are going to be okay going 6-6 every year. I hope you guys are going to be okay going 7-5 in a good year, in a very good year. Because as much as people want to talk about maybe the bottom tier, the middling tier of the SEC, the middle tier of the SEC just proved Texas is not ready to hang. So I don't personally like the move for Texas. For me, a smarter move for them would have been possibly to try to go to the Big Ten, maybe the Pac-12, but definitely the Big Ten, especially for revenue source, because we know it's a money move, and the Big Ten has the highest revenue deal out of all the Power 5 conferences. So we know it's a money move, and I think you probably could have been a little bit more competitive in the Big Ten. So I think Texas is just gearing up for like another decade of mediocrity, personally.
Did you say the Big Ten's payout per school is higher than the SEC? Because I thought the SEC had the highest.
No. Big Ten has them edged out by like 8 to 9 million.
Mil. Because I know the SEC, everyone gets the same amount. So like that's what makes it attractive. Is like Arkansas, for example, who, as our Iowa State media guy referenced as the SEC whipping boy the past few years, which that's fair. I mean, we have been.
Fine. Right.
But our revenue share is the same as Bama. So that's kind of what makes it which I know is around 40-something mil. I didn't realize the Big Ten was
the
out
Big
doing
Ten is
that
around
already.
like 50. It's like 53 mil. It's a pretty high revenue. About that was a big attraction why Maryland wanted to come over and Rutgers wanted to come over. You're getting a lot of money coming to because the Big Ten really started the Big Ten Network, and that was like the thing that transcended the game for them. And that we know revenue is everything, right? These people don't care about wins; they care about money.
No,
and
money.
So I think that would have been more attractive. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Man, that's good content right there, B. Holmes. That's why I listen to Blue Bloods College Game Time, and I'm a co-host. So here's my thoughts. And I'll keep it brief so we can get into our week 2 recap. But
yeah,
I do think you can look at the model or the template of Texas A&M, and I've got 2 sides to this coin. Okay, my first side of the coin is Arkansas used to own A&M when they were in the Big 12 as well. And now, granted, that was an era where Arkansas football was also very competitive in the SEC to the point where we were a game away from playing in the national championship. When we were number 3, LSU was number 1 when they had the Honey Badger, last game of the season. They ended up blowing us out, but that was like in recent history, that was Arkansas's like chance to play for a national title. So I understand that, but we still owned A&M, I want to say 3 or 4 years in a row while they were still in the Big 12. Then they come over to SEC, and people are saying the same thing. Man, y'all can't even compete with Arkansas. Like, what makes you think you're going to come in, compete with Bama, LSU, yada, yada, yada? And then literally their first year, Johnny Football takes off. They beat Alabama that year. They win 11 games. And then they kind of settled in. That Sumlin era, to your point, was more of a 6-8 win. But then they got Jimbo over there. So I think that there's a case to be made that by joining the SEC, it will enhance the firepower they're able to attract. But I guess the other argument on the other side of the coin is Texas doesn't have a problem attracting talent. Their problem has been developing these guys they get in. I mean, think about how many 5-star recruits they bring in. How many of them have translated to first-round draft picks? Very, very little, if any at all, compared to like Urban Meyer at Ohio State, right? And so I also wonder if now that OU and Texas are joining A&M in the same conference, will they all three now start to cannibalize each other somewhat because they all have that SEC sales pitch? And that's why obviously A&M was so disappointed and kind of felt betrayed, right? Because there was this gentleman's agreement that no other Texas school would get into the SEC. Kind of felt like they went behind their back, brought Texas in. Now they're bringing in OU. Here's the bottom line, though, on how I think this plays out for everybody. It's all going to depend on how they pod the league. Whether they do 2 divisions like they have now, but they make it north-south, or there's been some talk about podding it where there's pods of 3 or 4 teams, and then they kind of do a round robin as to who they play from the other pods. But they have the same 3 teams they play every year. So if you put OU, A&M, Texas, and Arkansas in the same pod, that's going to generate a lot of media attention. That's going to generate a lot of money. And I'll be honest with you, I kind of like Arkansas in that pod. Now, that's someone who hasn't beat A&M in almost a decade. However, I just think if Texas and OU now have the same competitive advantage in recruiting that A&M has as far as being in the SEC, I don't know. I think that but I also think that pod could work in Texas's favor. It could work in OU's favor.
True.
But I mean, if you stick either one of those teams in a pod with LSU, Alabama, and Florida, not that would geographically make any sense at all, but if you did, I mean, it's a mistake as far as I'm concerned.
I have a bold prediction about that, man. Not to cut you off.
Let's go.
Here's my bold prediction. And I've been sitting on this. I've been thinking about it all weekend. This is what I believe will happen. I believe, and this is where Texas comes back. And, man, if this happens, man, just call me a guru, a prophet, whatever you believe in. Call me that.
We got it on wax right here.
We have it on wax. I believe this, Trey. I believe Urban's not going to work out in Jacksonville. He's not an NFL guy. He's on record saying this. There's only a few schools he would coach at: Ohio State, Notre Dame, SC, and UT. I don't think Sark makes it past maybe year 3 at the latest, and they go poach Urban because he's a way better. He says he doesn't like recruiting, but he doesn't even have to recruit anymore. He's a way better college coach. He comes to Texas, and he brings them back. That's my bold prediction, man.
That's a bold prediction. And to your point about the recruiting, at that point, when you're that guy, you're Saban. You're not recruiting. You're closing. That's it. You're not recruiting. You're closing guys. You're sitting down with them in your office on their visit and closing them. You're not actually going places. And man, that's interesting.
I think it's possible, man. I don't because I read the whole article on how Saban ended up at Bama, which, goodness gracious, Rich Rod, it's all your fault, because if you would have went to Bama, maybe Michigan gets Saban, and man, we become Alabama. But man, I just don't see Urban really working in the league, and he's the type of guy, man, where he has to coach. It's in him, like he has to do it. He tried to be an analyst, and I think he hated it. You know, it's the itch to get back on the sideline, right? Now, everyone talks about it's his health. It's like, no, Urban just has to learn balance. Once he learns balance in his life, I think he can realize he can do the thing he wants to do. And what I feel like he's called it was be a college football coach. I see it happening, man. I could see him at Texas.
Yeah, I think it really just comes down to what you said, is how well he does at Jacksonville, because he has to coach, but he also has to win. He's not going to stay somewhere where he's losing for very long. Okay, Here's my I'm not going to call this a bold prediction, but I'll just call this my prediction of how once this move takes place. One, I think it happens sooner than 2025, and then two, I think that the Big 12 replaces the Pac-12 as the afterthought of the Power 5.
Oh yes.
One, because they will be a weaker conference. Two, the Pac-12 is trending upwards right now. Not as a whole, but no conference as a whole. I mean, but what do you look at? You look at the top tier teams of the conference and how they are on a national level, and that's how you evaluate and judge the Power 5 conferences. And I think when you look at what UCLA and Oregon, we're going to talk about that next week though. But I do think that the Big 12 replaces the Pac-12 as the afterthought of the Power 5 conferences.